You know, there are some words we use so often we just assume we know what they mean. Today we're diving deep into one of them, an insult that's been flying around for 2,000 years. But its real story? Well, it's way more fascinating and frankly more important than you might think. So, if I say the word Pharisee, what pops into your head? Yeah, for most of us, it's basically a synonym for a hypocrite, right? A self-righteous person who says one thing and does another. It's an ancient burn that still works today. But that's just the common meaning we've all inherited. But what if that simple one-word definition is actually hiding a much, much bigger story? What if the people we've been taught to see as the bad guys were, well, something else entirely? That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
To really get this, we have to travel back in time. We need to understand the world this word came from. And first-century Judea was anything but simple. It was a really complex, buzzing society with all these different Jewish groups, and they all had their own ideas about faith, about politics, and especially about how to live under Roman rule.
Okay, so let's break down who was who, because this is super important. You had the Sadducees. They were the wealthy, priestly elite who kind of worked with the Romans to keep the peace. Then you have the Essenes, who basically said, we're out, and withdrew from society. The Zealots, they were the revolutionaries who wanted to fight Rome tooth and nail. And then you have the Pharisees. And look at their role. Teachers of the people. This wasn't some isolated elite group. They were deeply involved in the everyday religious lives of regular folks. Remember that. It's going to be crucial. And here's the thing. This idea that maybe we're getting the Pharisees wrong, it's not some modern take. There's an incredible story from almost 100 years before Jesus that shows people were already making this exact distinction way back then. Okay, so let me introduce you to this guy, King Alexander Yananai. He was a powerful ruler, but he was also aligned with the Sadducees, which meant he was constantly clashing with the Pharisees. To put it mildly, they were not friends. But then, as he's on his deathbed in 76 BCE, something truly remarkable happens.
He turns to his wife and gives her this absolutely stunning advice. He says, look, don't worry about the real Pharisees. Don't worry about the Sadducees. The people you really need to be afraid of are the fakes. The hypocrites who just pretend to be Pharisees to look good, but whose actions are rotten. I mean, think about that. Even their political enemy could see the massive difference between the real deal and a phony.
So, if that distinction was already clear back then, what do we do with all the harsh language we read about in the New Testament? Well, what if we've been reading it all wrong? What if it wasn't a war between sworn enemies, but more like a really, really intense debate inside the same family? Let's dig into a perfect example of this. When Jesus says he came not to destroy the Torah, but to fulfill it, that sounds huge to us, right? Like he's talking about either wiping it out or following it perfectly. But in the Jewish world of that time, these were actually technical terms of debate. To destroy the Torah meant to argue a point of Scripture incorrectly, and to fulfill it meant you argued your point correctly. Jesus wasn't speaking like an outsider. He was using the specific jargon of a Pharisee, arguing with other Pharisees about the right way to understand their shared traditions.
And that right there, that's the whole ballgame. I mean, think about it. Who are you the toughest on in your own life? Complete strangers? Or the people you're closest to? The people you hold to the highest standards? Jesus' sharpest criticisms were aimed at the very community he was a part of. This wasn't an outsider lobbing grenades. This was an insider calling his own family to be better.
And this is where the story takes what might be the most surprising turn of all. Because the connection between Jesus, his followers, and the Pharisees, it goes way deeper than just a shared style of debate. We're talking about a shared heritage. I mean, just listen to this quote from the late Professor David Flusser, who is one of the absolute giants in this field. He said it wouldn't be wrong to describe Jesus himself as a Pharisee, in a broad sense. He's saying Jesus was operating from within that same worldview, not attacking it from the outside.
And if you need more proof, just look at the Apostle Paul. He didn't just mention his background. He proudly and repeatedly declared, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. He used that identity to connect with people. And he never gave it up, not even after becoming a follower of Jesus. For Paul, being a Pharisee meant you were serious about your faith, and he saw zero contradiction in that.
So, what ended up happening to the Pharisees? Well, after the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 CE, Jewish life was in crisis. And who stepped up to rebuild it? It was the intellectual descendants of the Pharisees. They gathered at a place called Yavne and began the monumental task of recentering Jewish life around the study of scripture and tradition. That work became the foundation of Rabbinic Judaism, which is the direct ancestor of modern Orthodox Judaism today. Their legacy is very much alive.
So when you pull it all together, we're left with a story that is so much richer, so much more complicated and connected than that simple stereotype we started with. Instead of finding enemies on opposite sides of a battlefield, what we actually find is a vibrant, intense, spiritual family, all arguing about how best to live out a faith they all loved.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question. If we could get a story this fundamental so wrong for so long, what other parts of history have we misunderstood? What other villains might not be villains at all? What other stories are just sitting there, waiting for us to take a second look?